The New Zealand First Leader has lashed out at the Race Relations Commissioner for having the audacity to tell politicians not to stoop to race lows in this year's election campaign. Winston Peters says he was racially abused at Ratana Pa in January and her office didn't want to know about it. Here's our political reporter Dame Susan.
The Race Relations Commissioner Dame Susan Devoy is urging politicians not to play the race card during this year's election campaign. It follows today's launch of a campaign warning that racial intolerance and overt attacks are on the rise. It's fronted by actor and director Taika Waititi.
As New Zealander of the Year, I'm calling on every one of my fellow Kiwis to help support a very important cause. Racism needs your help to survive.
Dame Susan says many population groups are being targeted, from Fijian to Chinese and Muslim.
What I'm asking people, and particularly asking politicians as we lead up to the election, that do not bring the race card into this. You know, let's debate the issues, let's use facts and figures and not hysterical hyperbole, and do not demonise all the immigrants that have come to live in this country and blame them for all the woes that are happening.
But the New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters says he's not interested in what Dame Susan has to say on the matter.
Look, earlier in the year, another pretend politician called me a house nigger. She did nothing about that, nor did her office. So frankly, I'm not interested in what Susan Devoy's got to say on these matters.
Mr Peters doesn't think racism will be part of this year's election campaign.
If the office thinks that they can supplement common sense and plain speaking and accuse that of being racist, then they're in for a big surprise in this campaign. And that's what I think that this office is trying to do. I'm surprised that she would actually make that comment. What on earth gives her the cause to say what she's saying? And frankly, you know, we're not going to stand by whilst a paid official gets it all wrong.
It's not the first time the pair have clashed. In April, Dame Susan said Winston Peters needed to focus on what is relevant after the New Zealand First Leader raised questions about work visa analysis carried out by two New Zealand Herald reporters. Mr Peters labelled the Herald's findings rubbish and highlighted the Asian ethnicity of the journalists involved. The Labour Party's campaign manager, Phil Twyford, says he agrees with Dame Susan's stance on the race card. He says he was rightly slammed when he singled out Chinese buyers in the Auckland housing market a couple of years ago.
And we learned a lot from that episode and recognised that, you know, while it was a genuine attempt to raise the issue of foreign investment in the housing market, it left many Chinese New Zealanders feeling really got at.
Mr Twyford says politicians shouldn't play the race card whether it's an election campaign or not. The National Party's campaign chair, Stephen Joyce, says it's very easy for groups to be targeted for perceived political gain.
If you end up scapegoating a group, I just think that ends up a bit destructive, obviously, to that group, but it probably says a little bit about your politics as well.
Dame Susan Devoy says everyone has a responsibility to speak up against racism. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Dame Susan.